This is Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast, and we are trying to get back into the swing of things. Randall's been busy. Randall, you've been going around giving presentations in a few different places, and we've got trips that we've been going on, trips that are coming up. But yeah, we are trying to get back into doing at least one podcast or live stream a week. So here we are. This is episode 99. Is that right?
99.
Yeah,
Cool.
Wow.
99.
We have plans for 100. You're gonna get dressed up.
We better make plans.
Yeah.
I don't think we should just let 100 come and go with no particular notice or nothing special.
Do you live in a cave now?
I know I've thrown out toga multiple times.
Toga, yeah.
Beyond that, I'm gonna have to define a little
I'll make a
clarity.
special graphic that uses my backdrop.
There you go. Put a UFO back there. That'll be your special graphic. Yeah, with Snake Bros, we just waited till 200. We went right past 100 without doing anything.
You just breezed right by it?
Yeah, and then we got to 200. We're like, maybe we should do something. So, but yeah, we ought to do something. But this is great. I can't believe we're at 99 already. So it's fantastic.
We're coming
Well,
up on
is.
4 years, so we're gonna have to pick up the pace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's true. We've been neglectful, but it's all because I think most of us have been traveling a lot.
Yeah. Brad just got home, right?
Yeah, Brad
From an extended
especially.
Trip.
Yeah, I had a long road trip. Just got home middle of the night 2 nights ago. So yeah, I'm still unwinding a bit, but totally
Brad
worthwhile and setting up some new ideas for tours.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks like he was in a cave. Yeah.
Well, this is kind of what the rocks look like out in Utah and Arizona, where I've been tooling around. Last place I stopped was Colorado National Monument on the way through Grand Junction, and then 70 cross country. So yeah, this is what the rocks look like. A lot of places out there.
So you did a recon for a potential Bonneville flood trip.
Definitely would like to try to pull that off in 2024. There's, as usual, more places than we're going to get to in a 5 or 6 day tour. But yeah, somewhere I think we'd start off in Salt Lake City and check out the side of Lake Bonneville itself, go across the Snake River Plain, and then end up in Boise.
Mm-hmm. So you went up through Red Rock Pass, I assume, when you made your recon. You were in Salt
definitely.
Lake City.
Definitely went out to Antelope Island, went up through Red Rock Pass, went up through Pocatello and the narrow zigzag stretch where the floodwaters rushed through before they made the big fan out there in Pocatello and American Falls.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the Mallard Gorge and, just many sites. It's a beautiful, unique area. The interstate actually goes down into the canyon for a couple miles, so it's really just an impressive drive across Interstate 84.
So you did the falls. You go to the Perrine Bridge.
Did go to the Prime Bridge. Yep, definitely. They got a big new walkway and visitor center there.
Yeah, really,
on both
dude.
sides of the bridge, lots of overlooks there, and they're actually doing base
Whatever,
jumping.
It's just too much, though, dude.
A guy approached us to see if we wanted
You
to do
can't-
base jumping with him.
We're gonna put that on the tour.
You can only take so much Alex Jones.
We should put
per
that on the
year.
tour, base jumping.
Yeah,
It's the only way.
It's
to
just
do
too
canyons
much.
is to
It's
jump
just
off
too
the
much.
top.
Too many red pills.
yeah.
It's
pretty
too high a red
expensive,
pill
but,
diet.
When we drove by a couple days later, we saw somebody actually up on the rail and jump off right as we were driving by on the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Great.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
it's about 450 feet deep there, I think, at Twin Falls. But
Yeah.
I went to Shoshone Falls, and it was more volume than we've ever seen because, again, I've gone in the spring, right? We've always
Yeah.
gone in the late summer, and everything's dry. Just a trickle out there, but yeah, it was gushing, so that was beautiful.
I got to see
Numerous
that.
places that we would hit on a tour.
Yeah, all right. But you didn't do the Bruno Deuce, right?
Did get out to the
Oh, you
Bruno
did?
Dunes.
That's
didn't
right.
Didn't get to Bruno Canyon.
Okay.
Super windy out there a lot of the time, and that's their reasoning for how that 400-foot high plus tallest dunes in the country or the continent even have collected in that semicircular basin there. But they're actually renting little sandboards that you can, like board down the dunes on. So we saw some people doing that, so watch that. But yeah, it's like you're getting
Sandboarding.
out there.
I love sandboarding.
Yep. So
We're both
they've
snowboarders,
got
so
an
we try that.
observatory and a new observatory out there. So yeah, we started talking to the woman at the visitor center about setting up a program where we could come, during the day and then stay at night and get a professionally run observatory view of the sky.
That'd be great.
Yo, what a toast up 2 hours.
To include in a,
Oh my
in a
gosh.
tour, absolutely. And then you guys got up to the bottom end of Hell's Canyon.
What were you doing?
What
Just
you
enjoying the
told me
night?
that,
Yeah, we went to
Must
the
have been
end of
some
the road.
amazing
End of the
Twitch
road, you get to the Hell's Canyon Dam.
Twitch
and you get a little
viewership yesterday.
beyond it, and then that's where the put-in is for the jet boat tours. And again, that was just rushing, gushing like crazy. It was just so much
voice
volume
share,
coming out
voice
there,
chat,
releasing through the
voice share?
dam. And,
A voice share? Oh, what, were you
just starting
streaming?
into the season where they'll take people,
Insane.
several hours
Were you streaming,
downriver
dude?
into the canyon
I missed it.
beyond where you
Were you doing
can
ASMR
drive, and
share
you jet boat
stream?
back up, however many miles
Chat.
it is. I didn't
Oh.
get the details on that, but
I hear you.
yeah, it's a early morning
With who?
excursion and spend a lot of the day doing that. So that would be probably a bonus, like 2-day add-on to the trip.
And why?
It's over 3.5 hours just to drive down in there
Yeah.
one way, and then you have to come back out the other way. So.
Oh, people talking about life stuff.
So then they do have boat tours, though, to take you through the whole canyon. Like,
Sounds nice.
take multiple days up to like Lewiston or Clarkston. Do they
Why?
go do that?
I don't think they go that far.
Okay.
But there's lots of rafting trips and water companies. We went through a town called Riggins on the Idaho
of people.
side. It's pretty much parallel to the canyon, and there's a bunch of whitewater rafting. The Salmon River goes through there, and there's access into Hell's Canyon. So they do multi-night rafting trips, etc. But I don't know about all the way to Lewiston.
Okay. Well, that'd be quite a tour, wouldn't it?
It's freaking gorgeous. It's unbelievable. When you and I went up there, right, we didn't know what we were getting into, and it was dark by the time we even got down to the dam, so we couldn't see
Look, I
anything.
fell
So we went up
on
in
the less sympathetic
morning
side of
time,
things.
So got to see it, and again, just green and beautiful and really dramatic being a mile down.
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
so
insane.
could mention for those that don't know,
Maybe you are, as they
Canyon is
call,
the
say,
deepest canyon in North
sociopathic.
deeper than the Grand Canyon. I don't know how much deeper, but it is deep.
Not much, but a whole lot narrower.
A whole lot
Really
narrower.
narrow,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Now, what? Of course.
I'm just kidding.
is the curious
I'm just joking,
thing
man. That was
that I'm
sarcasm. I'm not
curious
serious.
about is how much deepening was caused by the Bonneville flood? If the Bonneville flood could have removed hundreds of feet of basalt bedrock across the southern plain, it probably had to have removed at least that, over deepening the canyon. I haven't looked, but I bet you the gradient steepens once you get to
Need
that.
to earn a paycheck.
Well, it would would make sense that where the dam is, there would be
You got
a
some people
lot
who are only in my
place
life
where
because they need to earn a
gradient
paycheck. Yeah, true.
as compared to the average gradient east to west across the southern Idaho plain, which I'm guessing is pretty level, along there for the most part, which would imply to me that it might even be that there'd be more erosion and more.
Oh, that's a little
deepening
better.
of the canyon. Because those waters, that 300-foot drop, 300-plus foot drop, the estimates I've seen is that took about a year to accomplish. So it means that you had 40 million cubic feet per second running through that canyon for about a year. So,
Which 300-foot drop at Red Rock Pass?
Starting to
I'm
go at work.
guessing the bottom of the canyon
Shifted now.
compared to the top of the cliff. the canyon's about 400 feet deep.
Right.
And I said 300 because I'm going to assume that there was already a canyon there.
Which, I'm sorry, we were in Hell's Canyon, which is a mile deep. So where are we at 400 feet deep?
Well, back in Snake River Plain. You know,
Oh,
by Bryan Bridge there.
In
So,
Twin Falls, yeah. Twin
yeah,
Falls,
because what
okay.
I'm trying to do is
Right.
extrapolate from how much.
Oh, I think a
we
lot
can
of people are
estimate
like that.
That canyon got deeper.
Okay.
And we
I don't think anybody likes to work. I mean,
conservatively apply that to Hell's Canyon, because what I'm saying is I think at
I
Hell's
don't.
Canyon the gradient actually gets steeper.
Probably.
oh wow, crazy.
In that really disturbed area, right? That
Interesting.
Used
Yeah.
to be the Yellowstone hotspot, and where the basalts that filled up
Yeah.
the Columbia Basalt Plateau up to 10,000 feet or even more in some places, right? Flowed out of there. So yeah, it's really disturbed and craggy to start with.
Yep. Obviously a very interesting landscape. And then the feeder dikes are all in there.
What?
I haven't seen. You may have seen some there, but not recognized them. But there are the feeder dikes where the basalt lavas were, the magma was coming,
I would like to
erupting
have
out.
been able to identify that, but yeah, I don't know that I saw that specifically.
Right. Well, they've been
A lot of
identified.
territory there that you can't really access.
Yep. So anyway, that great trip. Good recon, Brad.
Oh,
And then you
yeah, it was
went up-
fantastic. So yeah, I'd love to get people out there and show them it next year and hopefully every year.
Well, the difference, I guess, between that and the Cabland tours we do is that there we would have to, it wouldn't work to have a central location.
Correct. Yeah,
We're
we gotta be
following-
mobile.
Gotta be mobile. But, anyhow, yeah, that would be a great.
No, I don't like
great
talking to
trip.
people
That'd be
in
a
the
great
office at work.
complimentary trip to the
I would
Missoula
rather
Field
not
trips.
talk.
So, we're on 99. So 98, we were kind of leaving it off. I know we were talking about the carbon fertilization effect and the greening. Some of the initial studies about the greening of the earth, and there's some interesting new stuff that's come out recently, and some stuff
Toad up
not
all night
quite so
partying.
recently that we haven't really talked about. But that I think definitely has
It's
bearing
just stimulating. You're right.
our
It is.
conclusions about, whether or not this increase in carbon dioxide is the disastrous affair that it's
I'm glad
been
you're
made
here,
out to, or if there's another side to the story of increased carbon
I'm glad
dioxide. So
you
that
and
was
Moonraker.
kind of one of the things we were addressing in several of the
Are in
previous
chat.
podcasts that we were
And
doing.
here.
And I think we were starting to look at some of the stuff that, some of the crop studies. We were looking at some of the enhancement of the growth of the yields that were due to carbon fertilization. Isn't that where we kind of left off?
Sounds
We
about
were-
right.
Yeah,
Been a
and we
month.
were kind of, getting into some of the, we got a lot of stuff on the sun that we got to talk about. So I'm going to have
Extreme
a whole-
empathetic side of
we'll do a
things.
whole
Wow, that's cool, man.
presentation or several dealing
Interesting.
with the role of the sun in all of this.
I mean,
But few things I don't know. Now
Yeah.
stop me if we've covered this.
I
specific
guess I have
material.
empathy, but it's just I prefer to be alone.
This is
Yo, what's
going
up,
back-
Christian?
we'll
How
go
you
back
doing,
to
man? Hope you're doing well.
1997. This is Graham D. Farquhar. This appeared in the journal Science, which is considered, peer-reviewed, prestigious journal. It's been around for many, many decades, even going back to the 1800s. So this was when it was first dawning on scientists that perhaps anthropogenic enhancement of carbon
Not good. Oh
dioxide
no, that's not
could
good,
be
man.
fueling
Why is that? Hope you're okay, dude.
could be enhancing.
Sorry, man. I'm
biomass
sorry.
accumulation.
If you're
Could
going
be
through something hard.
enhancing, leading to
I am
greater
sorry you
tree
have to
growth
face
and
that.
forest growth and things like that. So
Hope you're doing well,
this
man.
guy, 1997, was
It's okay if
probably
you're not doing
one
well,
of the important
but-
papers that shows kind of this shifting in the thinking and the acknowledgement that this carbon dioxide fertilization is underway. So he says what happens to vegetation when greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, increase in concentration, the temperature goes up. The Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, this is the Framework Convention on Climate Change is the group, the UN working group that established the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the purposes of providing a scientific rationale for the policies that were being developed in the Framework Convention. Right, so it started with the Framework Convention. That was the UN. It was not considered to be a scientific group. It was a political group made up of representatives and dignitaries and bureaucrats and stuff from the different nations. So this was the Framework Convention on Climate Change. So they established the IPCC to be the wing of working scientists that would provide the rationale for the policies that were being contrived in the Framework Convention.
When you have
So
69.
he says here, the Framework Convention on Climate Change commits the signatories to avoiding dangerous interference with the climate change. Laudable goal, of course. Interference that might harm the world's agriculture and natural ecosystems. But just what are the likely responses of vegetation? So then he refers to Street Parrott, who was studied the paleo-environmental history of high-altitude lakes in Africa. So
Like, who
her and
backboosts
her
me there?
colleagues, after
Like, what?
studying these high-altitude
So
lakes,
dumb.
examined the lake sediments, the pollen and leaf waxes that were in them, and the carbon isotope composition of the bulk organic matter and of other specific biomarkers. Their conclusion, this was their conclusion, that the increase in carbon dioxide, the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere since the last glacial period has allowed trees to grow where the vegetation was before 13,000 years ago, restricted to an almost treeless, grassy heathland. So, Ice Age, prior to 13,000 years ago, a treeless, grassy heathland. And now, there are trees, forests growing. And Street Parrott and her colleagues attributed this, presumably to the increase in temperature, obviously, but the increase in concentration of carbon in the atmosphere since the last glacial period has allowed trees to grow where the vegetation was before 13,000 years ago, restricted to a treeless, grassy heathland. Acknowledging
hell,
that
man.
carbon dioxide concentration itself affects the growth of trees enables us to see that the cooling of tropical land was not so great as we thought. Along these same lines, Sage has argued that agriculture, and I can get these references if anybody wants them, the references that they're making here.
Oh my
Along
god,
these
it
same lines,
sucks.
Sage has argued that agriculture became viable at several places around the world between 11,000 and 6,000 years ago, only
Man, this strat's
when
so
the
brutal.
CO2 concentration became
I guess we are
sufficiently
getting,
large to
it is
sustain
shorter.
decent yields
We
for
are
our
getting
first
more
crop.
runs per hour.
That's an interesting. So not only the role of the increase
But it's
in
just so
temperature,
brutal,
but the
man.
increasing carbon dioxide from 180 to 280 parts per million. So, in other words, the implication here of this is that when you're at that glacial low of 180 parts per million, is there even enough carbon dioxide to sustain high yield crops of any kind? For the individual plant, water use efficiency is almost directly proportional to the level of carbon dioxide for a given regime of temperature and humidity.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Please.
How far back do you have to go before the Ice Age period to get back to, you know, CO2 levels that we have today or that we've had recently?
Oh, probably, well, it's hard to tell. Regionally, there's probably been places, because we haven't talked about the record of stomata, plant stomata, which shows carbon dioxide concentrations all over the place, up to even 4, 5, even 600 parts per million pre-industrial times or even early industrial times. The question is, are we talking about global or is this a regional? Because our assumptions now is we have our carbon dioxide monitoring stations are in Hawaii. So you're grabbing carbon dioxide, you're grabbing samples of the air, looking at how much carbon dioxide is in it over Hawaii, right? So now the assumption is that that's pretty much uniformly distributed around the planet. But is it? Well, the stomata results would suggest that maybe it isn't. That maybe there are places, particularly over land, where you're going to see much higher concentrations.
Okay.
And we can get into that some.
It's just interesting because you're mentioning how it affects crop growth, and I'm just thinking also that it's not too soon, not too long
420,000.
after the end of the Younger Dryas that agriculture just begins.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like almost as soon as they had enough CO2 in the atmosphere,
Man.
they start having
Like, we're not united. Like, okay, I have this idea. We're not united. Imagine if every one of us, like,
It is.
see, like, I have 300
And
followers,
this
right?
is interesting too.
And 300 followers, like, I'm really blessed to have. But imagine if you had this network of, say, 75 people who you plan to make everyone partner, and you go, okay, I'm going to stream at this time at this hours, and then I'm going to raid this channel at this hours with these viewers. You don't even need that many people. You need like 75. And it's like, we're so not united. We're not united at all. We have no unity. Why is a community as big as like the elite not making everybody like partner? It's insane. Not even elite, just everybody. We're just so disconnected. I bring up the elite because I'm like, that's a community where we could maybe implement that. You know what I mean?
Water availability is concerned.
And it's just like we're so disconnected that we can't even achieve that for everyone. Just to have viewership, you know what I mean? It's really interesting.
With increasing CO2 concentration.
That's why you keep saying kick.
So now you've got doubling the efficiency.
Yeah, but I don't want to like fucking ditch
with the increase in CO2.
everyone here, especially with such good success. I mean, my ads, I fucking cranked up the ads, but
Like increasing CO2, why does that increase?
I mean, it's more.
Well, I think
Maybe it's
more
not the
having to do
goal
with
of the partner
with the
thing. Maybe it's just the goal of
So it's just correlated.
correlated, yes, not causative. Right. But that would be, it would certainly be correlated. In
It's just we're just really we're ununited. We're not united at all. We're really
But the way
disconnected,
he says it here, increased
and everyone's a
greenhouse
competitor
force
instead of
also
a
speeds up
helper.
the
You know what I
global
mean?
hydrological
It's
cycle.
crazy.
Okay,
It's
greenhouse
wild.
forcing.
Greenhouse, yeah.
So yeah, I would
Need a
interpret
fucking
that.
union, man.
Greenhouse effect.
And so, on average, the actual
Yeah, perhaps,
rainfall
honestly.
increases with increasing CO2 concentration. So, both photosynthesis and the enhanced greenhouse effect are more sensitive to CO2 levels
95.5.
when the concentrations are low. We've talked about that, right? The greenhouse effect is much more effective at, say, 100 parts per million. Like that, from 0 to 100 parts per million, there's way more capture of heat than there is from 300 to 400 parts per million.
Yeah, the greenhouse effect of CO2 specifically is more effective at lower levels.
Yes. So
It's crazy. I remember when the .tv URLs finally were released. I think in 2011. I was looking at
depending on developmental process,
building a website
the effect
for
of
our
180
laboratory
parts per million
in Brazil,
from the late glacial
and I saw the
maximum to the present
.tv URLs were being
could be
released.
much
'Cause
greater
I was going to make like a
than the
database,
effects of going from
a
360 to
HTML
540
user
parts per million.
interface and
And this is
MySQL
referring again
database
back
to build
we talked about
data,
the logarithmic
metadata from.
effect. The thermal capture effect. We've looked at the graphs, how you've got that
It's
logarithmic, comes up sharp, that first 100 parts per million.
From the database.
starts tapering off, and once you get to 3 run.
Anyways, the reason why I bring that up is because I remember when
It's-
that
it's
top
amazing.
TV was not even like, will
And
it
we
catch
talked about
on?
how the computer model
And then look at
have
Twitch.
to
It's
introduce
insane.
a series of, you know,
I think I got a
feedback,
.co,
positive
.co.
Yeah.
that self-amplifying positive feedback.
Right.
So the effects of the 180 part per million increase from the late glacial
Yeah, I
maximum
had
to the present
ecoboard.co. I
360
think
parts per million.
was my
This is
website.
back in 97. Could
Ecoboard.co.
be much greater than the effects of
It was
going
going to be
from
the
360
Facebook
to
of
500.
science.
The latter being twice.
I had this
the
database, had everything and user
pre-industrial.
profiles. You make your
In other
user
words,
profile. It was
pre-industrial
like, it was
level,
it was a
280
copy
parts
of
per million.
Facebook for
Double it,
science,
you got
but then I
500.
realized scientists are
plants of today
assholes
are much
and no one
less
wants to talk to
water
each
and
other
CO2
during work,
limited
which I don't
than
blame
they
them.
were at the late glacial maximum. Nevertheless, one suspects
like
that the
LinkedIn.
direction of change in the near
LinkedIn
future will be
sucks.
the same as that following the late glacial
God, I
maximum.
hate LinkedIn.
One of increased
It's amazing to,
effective
to
rainfall,
potentially
with the
network with people,
agricultural
but
and
man,
ecological consequences that follow.
it's amazing to network. I'll
Given
be
that
honest,
the
but
availability
everything is
of
fake. It's all
water-
fake.
Now this is important. Given that the
Jobs are fake.
availability of water for agriculture is already becoming such a problem, this aspect at least of atmospheric
Jobs are
change is a
fake on
welcome.
LinkedIn and Glassdoor and online and stuff.
So yeah, I think we talked about the because this is jumping
So I've heard
back
that
to
companies get a
1992.
kickback for looking for
Tell me if we already
people but not actually being
covered
employed,
this, but maybe we didn't. This was also in science.
just to collect people's information.
It's three authors here. Pekka E. Kaupa. The title of the
nightmare
article is
out there.
Biomass and the Carbon Budget of European Forests, 1971 to 1990. The facts about forest resources seemingly contradict. That is, yeah, this is when they really begin to accumulate a whole series of satellite surveys of actual forestry. So previously they had been making projections.
Well, I mean, on
Those
Twitch,
projections were based upon essentially the assumption that
like a
forest land is gonna
donation
continue to be lost for whatever reason.
through my PayPal, I get
Primarily, I guess,
100%
Agricultural,
of the
through
donation.
industrialization, all of that, right? So it says here the facts about forest resources.
So I mean, it's not
seemingly
like
contradict
there's not.
the widely held view that European forests are declining.
That's
So
why
the
you get in
facts about
now.
those forest resources contradict
People take like
the
3%.
widely held view that
No,
was
I
still
don't
widely
think they
held in
take any
1992.
here in
We
Canada.
first elaborate on reasons for the increase of forest resources, and then describe pitfalls in the interpretation of forest health surveys, which have contributed
I don't think
to
so.
pessimistic view about European forests. Lawson reports that growing stock and
I haven't
timber
had
growth
any,
potential in the
PayPal
United
charges.
States have been repeatedly and seriously underestimated because they're not taking account
Blame Elon
carbon
Musk.
fertilization effect. An increase of forest resources can be explained by factors such as silvicultural development, favorable climatic conditions, and the favorable, without specifying what would be the favorable climatic conditions, well, the 20th century increase in temperature. That's basically what would be implied by that statement. And then finally, the fertilization.
Well, with kick,
effects
so
of
the thing
additional
is,
carbon dioxide in the
I
air
get taxed.
and the
right?
deposition of plant nutrients.
So
what's happening
does
is
the
people are
payout
making
at kick?
projections
Do you
based
get
on,
taxed here? Because I get
these
taxed
ideas about the forest being
15%
destroyed for usage,
per
Yes.
but
sub.
they're not taking into account that that actually. it's
So I
growing
receive
better because of
35%
CO2.
of
So
a
then when
sub.
somebody goes out there and actually counts, or they use satellite images to count it, they're like, "Wow, it's much better than."
But I
that."
have the ads on, like I have ads
Okay.
ranked
That's what he
high.
said.
So
That's
when
the
like
gist of
someone
what I
subs
just
or
said.
subs and they
Oh, yeah.
watch ads, it like it's a lot of ads skipped. You know.
So then we get back to
so I'm
Sherwood
streaming a lot
Edsel,
right now.
who we
Also,
introduced,
I
and
I
his son
appreciate
is
it.
carrying on his work that we introduced
So
in
much.
the last discussion. This was
I really
from
do.
the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. It came out in 1991.
It's nice to receive a Twitch
This
payout.
is what Sherwood is saying. He says the question of ultimate surface temperature increase thus comes down to
Fuck
one
off.
of
How'd
estimating
you
the
fucking see
maximum
me?
amount of CO2
Wasn't the right
that man is
animation
likely
anyways.
to release to the atmosphere in the years ahead. A doubling of current emissions.
Yeah, like there's no way they
lead to
tax.
an
Like,
atmospheric
I know, I'm
CO2
certain
content in the order
Amazon
of
doesn't
700 parts per million,
tax
which would probably be climatically
Twitch,
acceptable.
or the government, I'm
But
sure,
only if
doesn't
Earth's
tax
forests
Amazon. They have
are not
tax loopholes
decimated
for
in the
sure,
meantime.
100%.
On the other hand, if the forested
So
areas
Amazon
of
gets
the globe
50%,
could be increased, even greater
and
quantities
government
of
gets
CO2 could
15,
safely be released to the atmosphere.
and presenter
In
gets
this regard,
35.
nature becomes our ally. And we did get into this, but it's worth.
It's not a choice whether you choose to pay or not.
As
It's
increases
automatically
in
deducted.
atmospheric CO2 result in growth rate
So in order to
increases of
receive that amount back, you
5
have to
times
file
greater
on your taxes that
than
you
growth
did all
rate
this and worked all
increases
this.
in non-woody plants. Hence, as the CO2 content of the air continues to rise in
It's
years
just such a
ahead,
fucking shit show.
woody species will begin to expand their ranges, as is already happening in
I
many
appreciate it, my
parts
dudes.
of the world. My RB, my Nenny, and others, I don't know how many others. This was in Nature, the British Journal of Science, in 1997. We see that in the 90s, they're really becoming aware of this effect of, the greening, if you will. This is called increased plant growth in the northern high latitudes from 1981 to 1991. Variations in the amplitude and timing of the seasonal cycle of atmospheric CO2 have shown that an association with surface air temperature consistent with the hypothesis that warmer temperatures have promoted increases in plant growth during summer and or plant respiration during winter in the high latitude. Here, we present evidence from satellite data that the photosynthetic activity of terrestrial vegetation increased from 1981 from 1981 to 1991. The winter and spring warming of the interior of the continents of Asia and North America in the 1980s may be a result of natural causes not yet explained, but its timing is consistent with an enhanced greenhouse effect caused by buildup of infrared absorbing gases in the atmosphere. Although it amounted
I
to a
appreciate
departure of
all
only
your
a few
support
tenths
always
of a
so
degree
much. I really do.
from previous record
It's actually been
temperatures,
helpful.
it was associated with far greater warming in the spring months at high northern latitude. Biospheric activity there, based on our analysis, increased remarkably as a result of this warming.
So the tiny bit of warming had a massive effect on in the spring. That's
Yes,
okay.
yes, and the activity and increased the increased productivity and increased biomass.
Okay.
So let's see, and then, so this shows the same thing, balancing the carbon budget from 2007. Experiments have shown that most C3 plants, which is all trees, many crops, and vegetation from cold regions, respond to elevated concentrations of CO2 with increased rates of photosynthesis, increased productivity, and increased biomass. The biomass response to elevated CO2 averages between 20% and 30%, based on measurements from more than 100 experiments. The pools of carbon in the litter and soil carbon also increase under elevated CO2. Warmer temperatures and changes in soil moisture.
But I mean, again, the issue I don't think is the viewer. What they're trying to do, they're trying to put the ownership and the blame and the viewer and whether some successful or not based on the viewers. When in reality, these Amazon's getting, I don't even know the ad amount of money they're getting. They're getting insane ad money. Like, it's just so, like, to put the blame on the viewer is such a fucking dick move. Because they're making so much money off the ads. Like, it's so insane. It's too insane. It just angers me so much. We need a union, like, big time. Like, this is fucked.
This increased water use efficiency reduces the effects of drought. Higher levels of CO2 may also alleviate
Like we have no
other
unity. We
stresses
don't
in
even
climate,
have like there's not
such as
even
high
a
temperatures
friggin'
and ozone. The observation that
a
productivity
partner
is
team
increased
where you just
relatively
join this
more
channel
in low
and you just
productivity
watch this
years
random person's channel until
suggests
they're
that the
partner and then you
indirect
move to the
effects
next
of
channel. Why is
CO2
this not a
in
team?
ameliorating stress
We should definitely
may
make that
be
as a,
more
like a
important
Twitch
than the
team.
direct
Can we
effects
do
of
that?
CO2 on
And everyone joins
photosynthesis.
and everyone just like
In other words,
you
increase
join to
the amount of
watch.
CO2 in the atmosphere and
You just
plants
watch what you have it in the
respond
background as
by
a
being
viewer.
healthier and more resistant to
It's
stress.
insane. We have no unity.
CO2 and nutrients may also
All this
interact
competition, all this petty
synergistically
bullshit.
to increase carbon
We're just fighting
storage.
against
Nitrogen
one another.
fertilizer
It doesn't make
and
any
elevated
sense.
CO2 together had a greater effect
We're all
on
suffering
forest
crabs in a
growth
bucket style,
than the
man.
sum of their
It's not
individual
right.
effects. The relative stimulation was again greater in a nutritionally poor site. So in other words, think of it this way: the parts of the biosphere, the
It's insane.
ecosystems that are under stress are
Like it's insane.
not healthy. They respond even stronger than the rest of the biosphere with the increased carbon dioxide concentration. Of course, none of this stuff is actually, you don't hear any of it, through mainstream media.
I guess you actually don't
They
gain
never
that
talk
much more
about
if you're
these
partner.
Then 2008, tree and forest functioning in an enriched CO2 atmosphere.
That's what I mean. The
appeared to
payout
new
effort
phytologists.
is not worth it. If the payout effort was
Henry
higher, it would
Facts
exist.
say
Not that I'm not
David
dissing
Ellsworth,
partner or
James
partners.
Forests
I'm saying,
exchange large amounts of CO2
like
with the
the
atmosphere
effort
and can influence
to
and be
increase in
by atmospheric CO2. There has been a recent
doesn't exist to warrant
proliferation
a
of literature
society
on the
like that
effects
and
of
the effort,
atmospheric CO2
unfortunately.
on forest trees. More than
It takes like
300
no
studies of
effort.
trees on 5
It's
different
crazy.
continents
To,
have been
like just to keep
published
a
in the
browser
last
open
5
for someone,
years.
it's insane.
These include an increasing number of field studies with a long-term focus
so insane.
and involving CO2 by stress or environmental interactions. The recent data on long-term effects of elevated atmospheric CO2 on trees indicate a potential for a persistent enhancement of tree growth. Recent studies indicate that elevated CO2 causes a more persistent stimulation of biomass increment and photosynthesis than previously expected. So there we go. Study after study is showing the effect of increasing carbon dioxide. Now, that's not to say that all of the effects are good, but interestingly, in the public discussions that we're seeing about climate change and the climate crisis, that side is completely ignored in favor of the idea that the increased carbon dioxide is going to cause some kind of climate disaster. Which, I think is fair to ask, is that based upon sound, reasonable science? Is that based on
Oh my
actual
God, guys,
facts and the
sucks.
evidence? That side of the equation. Now, I've shown you just a little bit here that it in effect shows, well, yeah, there absolutely is positive effect of a mildly increased temperature and the increase in carbon dioxide concentration. This has been well established. That's what I just, the quote I just read you, that there have been, more than 300 studies of trees on 5 different continents. This is actual data that supports the notion that there is a positive side to this increase in carbon dioxide. Now go to the other side and look at the evidence that there's going to be a carbon dioxide-induced climate disaster. How strong is that evidence? Well, I've tried to show, and I have shown, if you've watched the last 10 or 12 or whatever episodes, how the data is manipulated and how it's presented to the public. We looked at tornadoes, we looked at hurricanes, I think we looked at some at droughts, we've talked about wildfires. None of these have we really taken a deep dive into looking at the comprehensive mass of evidence around these things, but enough to show that in all of these areas, it is highly questionable. You know, in a minute here, I'm going to pull up the latest accumulated cyclonic energy graph, so we can look at that. I think it's up through hurricane season of 2022. We've looked at this graph before. It's a great graph. It's republished every year. We can go here.
Should we take a break before we pull that up?
Sure.
Close to it.
Yeah, let's take a little break. I will be prepared to.
All right, we will be right back, folks.
Oh my god.
Well, Mike, before we, launch back into it, would you like to, take a few minutes and kind of share some of your feelings and thoughts about your new celebrity status to all the fans out there?
I have no idea what to say. I was startled when I encountered it for the first time. I don't know.
People are jealous, Mike. Other people are jealous that people saw you and got to talk to you.
Yeah.
The elusive, quiet Mike, the normal guy, was spotted in the wild.
He's been seen in the wild. In his natural environment.
Yeah, lugging pounds of video equipment, cases of video equipment, and looking startled, like, what?
Yep. A normal guy in the headlights. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Cosmographia.
Okay.
Back from the break. Are we going to continue on, or?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Or we could all just sit here.
That's what I do.
I like.
Well, yeah.
I'm going to try to, feel it out when Randall thinks the show has already started, and just let's roll it.
Yeah.
That was a good intro.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. All that discussion we were having about the pyramids and the mounds, I was thinking that was all, I don't know how I could have thought that, because we didn't obviously have the big dramatic roll in, but, anyhow, but I like Brad's idea. That could be some good little bonus stuff.
Yeah.
Put
we'll
that
get
out there. Yeah. Okay. Well, anytime.
We're going.
Oh, we're in.
Yeah, we're in.
We're in.
Bro.
Oh my. Okay, so now we actually are in. Okay. I was waiting. Where's the big dramatic? Well, we're back, folks.
Welcome back from the break. Usually.
Well, who said that?
Yeah,
We
you
did. Where was I?
Yeah, I liked the introduction with Mike, so I was just like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So did that all get recorded? I didn't even think that when I said that.
Yeah, it's recorded. So
It's running the whole time.
Kyle's introduction back into the show. You just back it up a little bit, and we can include Mike's sighting in the wild.
All those faces you made.
Yeah.
No.
If I ever get to one of your adventures out west, I'll have to run to a damn place.
Yeah.
I know. Listen, I know there's a
Famous Mike.
wild guy inside there just waiting for an opportunity to get out.
That's right.
Bring your guitar, Mike, and we'll put on a show.
It'll be
All
like
right.
every night Mike's partying until 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
Having
Yeah.
to drag him out of his room.
Well, we got a project going with Mike right now. We're building a pergola for Mike, so I got to get over there tomorrow and see what they're doing.
Ah.
Yeah. What are you going to do with that pergola? You're going to let?
Is that where you go when you're like you don't get to go to heaven? You're not going to hell.
Yeah, you go to the
No,
pergola.
pergola is not purgatory, but
They're related, perhaps.
See, every time I hit that first one, I always want to aim the second one. I gotta YOLO the second one. I got to. I don't know why I always freeze up.
Aha.
Like just my strat changes. I don't know. It's some weird mental thing.
okay.
So there we go.
Now I had to take a pecan tree down because it was shaded.
Like, that was a way better attempt. It was not really YOLO, but it was semi-YOLO.
I need a pergola.
Like, this might be 23 pace, right?
Well, it's going to be nice.
This is the run I need. This is the pace I
You know
need.
that.
It is, yes.
And are you gonna let it? You're gonna let biomass accumulate on it.
That back boost
I'm
sucks.
planting some,
I guess we'll never know.
jasmine vines or something.
Okay.
Yeah, it was probably
Grape
23
arbor, who
pace.
knows?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to get over there and see what they're doing. I know they were scrolling the ends of the joist there today and yesterday. Yeah, I think it's gonna look nice.
It is.
Okay, so we were talking about carbon dioxide,
We're getting into the cyclonic
the cyclonic.
graph.
Yeah, that's a cool graph. So let me see if I can pull that up here. So yeah, there's just been a new one updating of the accumulated cyclonic energy that just came out. Yeah, here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. We'll revisit some of the ones that we've already looked at, just so you can see the trend here. Share screen. You are sharing. Okay. Total accumulated cyclone energy. So that's your ACE. ACE. 24-month running sum. So in this particular graph, you can see we're starting in 79 and coming up to 2009. And energy's on the left. This is your global, and this is your northern hemisphere hurricanes. Global hurricanes, northern hemisphere hurricanes. And you can see year by year, you can see that they were fairly low in the 80s. And then there was a big spike in the 90s. Then it went down in the early 2000s. Then there was another spike in about 2005, 2006. Then we come here for.
Always get
up to
panicky when I hit the first camera. I don't know why.
Compare. Here you see this double spike, followed by this. It's trending down. And then you can see what it's done. It's trended down.
Oh, I suck.
And then as we get into 2015, 2016, you see it spiking again. You see the last 4 decades of global and northern hemisphere accumulated cyclone energy. 24-month running sums. Note that the year indicated represents the value of ACE through the previous 24 months for the
Oh, that boost.
hemisphere, which is the bottom line in the gray boxes.
That was such a
and
bad
the entire
boost.
globe, which is the top line in the blue boxes.
I guess the guards were all in
The
weird
area in between
locations.
represents the southern hemisphere total accumulated cyclonic energy. So in effect, you know, when you've got a lot, I mean, this means you got a lot of hurricanes or typhoons, and here you have low numbers.
It's just so slow.
Hurricanes and typhoons. So here's your, over here it says your accumulated
It's just so
cyclone
slow.
energy in knots. So this is the wind speed, and a knot is, let's see.
Yeah, I was wondering, what are they measuring? Like average wind speeds of the cyclones, or?
Yeah, this is, so this is the accumulated cyclone energy in 10,000 knots squared. So that's the accumulated cyclone energy. So that's 10,000 knots squared. 10,000 knots squared. I'm going to play with that. I'm going to go back. I did read Maui's original explanation for this, but it's been literally 10 years ago. It's more the graphic depiction, though, that conveys.
Yeah.
So then the next one gets us up to 2022. So here we go. This one I like a little bit. This is, so all hurricanes greater than 64.
Wait, why is this full screen?
knots.
Oh, because, right,
64
I want a
knots,
full screen.
73.65 miles per hour.
Right.
And then your major hurricane, so he's
I want a full
broken
screen
the
for
graph
me
up
because
a
the
little
cameras are bigger.
here.
Okay, right here it says they do this. They calculate by summing the square of a tropical cyclone's maximum sustained winds measured every 6 hours.
Okay, summing the square of the
Yeah.
tropical. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
And then the resulting total is divided by 10,000 to make it more manageable. So
Right.
that's- Okay.
All right. But here it's a little
What
easier
is
to interpret
this?
because it's
Why?
directly, the
I gotta
number
really
of
improve that
knots.
second camera, man.
So all hurricanes greater than 64
Still
knots,
aiming it.
64 knots, 73 miles per hour. Major hurricanes at greater than 96 knots, that's 110 miles. So this is all hurricanes on top.
I think I gotta YOLO it.
And this is major hurricane per year. So here's your major hurricanes. And there's less of them, obviously.
Wow, I gotta get it.
96 knots, which I think here's 110.
That was insane. I didn't see the frame that I shot that. That was
hurricanes,
insane.
obviously there's going to be more.
That
Thing
was
to keep in
insane.
mind, though, of course, though, is that just like with tornadoes, there's more hurricanes being reported than there was.
Like, that would be so fast if we can do something like
beforehand.
that.
We've increased the number of named storms. So,
But it looks
Just
like
fucking
there's an
YOLO the
overall
shit out of
downward
everything.
trend from 90 to like 14. There's this
Yeah.
long downward trend, and then it kind of jumps up after 14.
but it doesn't jump back
It
up
just
to.
two spikes,
it's
really.
still
Yeah.
less than the 90s.
Yeah.
And even into the 80s. So, I mean, what you're seeing here is that over a 40-year span of time, there's certainly no upward trend discernible.
No.
This was an ENSO year here, El Nino Southern Oscillation.
Yeah, I see that. That's the highest major hurricane spike in the whole graph right there in 2016.
There's
Yeah.
like 24 pace.
So what this is showing us here is that, and this is accumulated, this is Atlantic hurricanes and Pacific typhoons both, Northern Hemisphere and Southern. So it's for the globe. It doesn't count specific hurricanes.
Even
as
that
much
stopping
as
and
it
aiming
does
is too
looking
slow.
at the total energy expended. And of course, the total energy expended is going to be directly related to the actual numbers of events, typhoons and hurricanes. But this next
That back boost, man.
series
Like,
of slides,
why?
which we haven't looked at
So
before,
fucking dumb.
it's quite interesting. These are the deep blue holes that are in the Western Atlantic, and they serve as repositories for sediment. And during extreme weather events, mainly hurricanes, lots of more coarse sediment is flushed into these holes.
Like the back, like fuck
What
off,
this study
man.
did was it extracted pores from the bottom of these deep holes in the ocean floor, where these layers of
Stuff
sediment is
sucks.
accumulated. So this is a report written by
I
one of
actually
the
love
lead
this level a lot.
scientists. It's written for probably an online journal called The Conversation, and this is what it says here.
I think 23 is my true,
This is Tyler
honest
Winkler.
goal.
He's a postdoctoral
I was thinking maybe I could get
researcher
squeezed
in
at 22, but I don't
oceanography
think so,
with Woods
man.
Hole Oceanographic
Not before
Institution.
23.
If you look back at the history of Atlantic hurricanes since the late 1800s, it might seem hurricane frequency is on the rise.
23 is a great time.
The year 2020 had the most tropical cyclones in the Atlantic with 31.
That would still kind of be robbery. If I get a 23, that'd be insane.
2005. The past decade saw 5 of the 6 most destructive Atlantic hurricanes in modern history. Of course, now when you're talking destructive Atlantic hurricanes, the yardstick for that is the destruction of infrastructure, right? What is the dollar value of what was destroyed? So of course, if you look at the
I'm aiming too much there. I just gotta
extreme
YOLO
amount
like
of
Irie
increase
says.
of coastal development that has taken place in the last few decades, of course, anything that makes landfall, if it makes landfall on the west coast of Florida, say last year as compared to 50 years ago, obviously, even without any adjustments for, even with adjustments for inflation, there's going to be a huge discrepancy in the amount of actual damage to buildings and roads and power lines and all the rest of that stuff,
Now
right?
come
Because
fuck
there's so
on,
much
man.
more of that now, right? Okay, then a year like 2022 comes along with no major hurricane landfalls until Fiona and Ian struck in late September. The Atlantic hurricane season, which ended on November 30th,
I mean, I might do a bunker
hurricanes and
100
14
run.
named storms.
That might
It's a
actually be
reminder
fun.
that small sample sizes can be
See if we can get a
misleading
PB or something.
when assessing trends in hurricane behavior. There is so much natural variability in hurricane behavior year to year and even decade to decade that we need to look much further back in time for the real trends
would
to
be
come
fun.
clear. Fortunately, hurricanes leave behind telltale evidence that goes back millennia. 2,000 years of this evidence indicates that the Atlantic has experienced even stormier periods in the past than we've seen in recent years. That's not good news. It tells coastal oceanographers
I don't know why I did that.
that we
I
may
guess
be
Boris is
significantly
the
underestimating the threat
is
hurricanes
the X
pose
Factor, right?
to Caribbean islands and the North American coast.
Oh yeah, I
in the
think you gotta
future.
watch the cutscene for that
Which is
guy, that guard.
Certainly, I think a legitimate cause for concern. Because
I forget how to do this level. I think you gotta watch the cutscene for that guard.
There have been episodes that have been
I think.
more stormy than modern times. Well, what we have to do now, breaking this down, is we have to acknowledge that these stormier episodes in the past had to, by implication, be natural.
Maybe I'm not gonna play this level.
And then we contrast that with the assumption that hurricanes are supposedly increasing in ferocity and intensity and so on in recent years because of global warming. But what we see, in fact, is essentially the opposite of that. So let's go to the next one here. So this is showing here on the right, you'll see a sample of the core. And you'll see this, you've got this coarse layer that's sandwiched between finer grained sediment on top and bottom. This coarse material represents a hurricane. And so by taking these cores and analyzing these coarse sediments, not only the how coarse they are, but the stuff that's in them, which will tell you something about, you know, obviously a wind moving at 200 miles an hour or 150 miles an hour is going to be carrying material from far distant places much more effectively than a 20 or 30
I'm gonna cut a little sooner because I'm not that fast. I gotta cut a little sooner.
This is your greater than 250 micrometer sediment in milligrams per cubic centimeter. So this is your depth, your sediment depth over here. So you're going down in centimeters, right? So you're going down here, and what you're seeing over here with these yellow boxes is rough dates, right? So the deeper you go, the farther back you're going, right? So you can see here at the top, 1980, and then we're getting down 470 plus or minus 15.
Oh my god, that was the worst thing ever.
415, 490, 500. So they're generally dating a little bit older. But of course, again, there's going to be discrepancies because it's not going to be uniformly linear, because different hurricanes are going to be bringing stuff in and depositing in those holes that might be older or younger. Over the longer term, yes, there'll definitely be a trend. So they're going back down here to the bottom 1,000 years ago, right?
Oh,
So
that
what
setup
you
was
see here
shit.
is like is that the excuse me,
I think my stick's not very good
numbers of
anymore.
hurricanes have declined considerably in the post Little Ice Age
It's fine.
warmth compared to these early. So, I mean, here's the last 100 years or so, right? And here's the last 900 years. So this does not show, clearly does not show, at least in the Western Atlantic, does not show an increasing trend in violent hurricane. In fact, it's showing just the opposite. Now, does this apply to the whole? No, this is pretty much
At least
regional.
not ones that happen to occur where they could drop sediment in that particular hole.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I mean, but there was this study involved, I think, about 6 or 8 of these holes. So it wasn't just one hole. Yeah, it was not one hole. I think there was like 6 or 8 of these holes that were. So it's pretty much a, you know.
That's the
Western
timing.
Atlantic, in the area
That's
of the
the 23
Bahamas,
timing.
which of course is dead center of the paths of most hurricanes. So if we go to the next slide here, the compiled Bahamian records document substantially higher hurricane frequency and this is quoting this guy, the Northern Caribbean during the Little Ice Age around 1300 to 1850 than in the past 100 years. That was a time when North Atlantic surface ocean temperatures were generally cooler than they are today. But it also coincided with an intensified West African monsoon. The monsoon could have produced more thunderstorms off the western coast of Africa, which act as low pressure seeds for hurricanes. But if you look at the top up here, I think I've got the next one is a bigger, there we go. So yeah, if you look here, so this is hurricane per century, let's see, hurricanes per century, you can see going up and down, and then you get to the medieval warm period, they dip down, then they come up, and then you see right here is in this particular blue hole that we were just looking at, you see that there's a big spike. Look over here, hurricanes per century. Yeah, per century. And this is in the years, so you see up here 1,600 years. So this is the depth of the Little Ice Age, right here. And you can go down, you'll see the same thing happening here. And then there's a decline in frequency as we come up between 1,800 and 2,000. And then same here, and then we go to the next one. We can see the same thing. Here's your Little Ice Age. And then with the post Little Ice Age warming, hurricane frequency drops off. And this would have been the medieval warm period here, going back 800 years ago.
What?
Right. And then you see here, this particular compilation goes up during the Little Ice Age with the cold weather, and then with the warming weather, it's dropping down again. So this is not compatible with the notion that it's absolutely a given that the increase in warm temperatures is currently driving or going to drive the frequency and intensity of hurricane. So anyways, I find that very interesting. So as far as hurricanes go, at least, you can't make the claim that hurricane intensity has shown any increasing trend at all, let's say since the mid 20th century. It's well within the bounds of what we would think normal. So then the question is that if there has been no increase in the number of hurricanes with the 1 degree warming since the end of the 19th century, and with 100 plus parts per million increase in carbon dioxide, if there should be this increase, should that not be a signal that we've already recognized? The point here is that you don't see the signal. You don't see a signal if 100 parts per million increase in carbon dioxide does not increase the numbers of hurricanes.
Oh, there's 2 doors.
Up to this point,
obviously.
are we then justified in concluding that the next 100 parts per million is going to cause a drastic increase in hurricane intensity or frequency? And the answer is, I don't think we can extrapolate that from this data.
Like, why?
Is this data from different
might have been
sources?
23 pace, but the 4th camera was really slow. Or the 3rd was
What
slow.
happens in cold weather, if the
it's just too
Arctic,
shit.
for example, is more susceptible to the warming, it's going to be more susceptible in the reverse as well.
25, insane. That last camera was really bad.
Lower latitudes in the last 100 years. If that is due to the 1.2 degree warming, roughly, if we reverse that, then presumably it will undo, right? Well, what that means then is that the higher latitudes in the Arctic realm becomes colder. Well, so it's also the latitudinal gradient, because if you think about this, the cold weather, like say we talked about this with regards to tornadoes. Tornadoes, you've got cold Arctic fronts coming down, being swept across the Midwest. They're being shunted along the mountain barrier of the West, the Rocky Mountain front and so on, coming down, moving out onto the Great Plains area, where the cold air from the Arctic meets warm air coming up from the Gulf. And that particular topographical configuration of North America is what makes Midwest North America so conducive to tornadoes, and more tornadoes in the American Midwest than anywhere else on the planet. And it's that particular geography that does it. It's the meeting of hot and cold. So if you make the Arctic colder, but the lower latitudes stays relatively warm, that could increase hurricane frequency, and that might be what's going on here. I'm not an expert in this to where I can make any final conclusion, but that might very well be what is going on. But the takeaway here is that you can't conclude from this data we've looked at, that there is up to this point any trend in increasing power or frequency of hurricanes. So from that, are we confidently going to predict that the next 100 parts per million or the next 1 degree of warming is going to create that trend that has been missing so far? Well, I think that's a legitimate question.
I think we're going to try the Archives 2.x. That's what we're going to do.
So then, the question becomes,
just to try it out.
The thing that you got to remember, the IPCC now was given the mandate to find the anthropogenic signal in climate change. And that's why, for example, they haven't really considered in depth the role of the sun. And when the IPCC was established, you got to remember, this was just at the very dawn of our deployment of solar satellite, that we've been watching the sun now for...
No pun intended.
That's right. No pun intended. But we've been watching now for going on 30 years. We've accumulated a lot of data on the sun. Plus, we've also seen other suns in other parts of the galaxy.
It's like 26 pace.
Also seem to be going through a high degree of variability.
Oh yeah.
Much higher than assumed for our own sun. And these are very sun-like stars that have been singled out. There's at some point we have to dive into that, because that's extremely interesting stuff. But anyways, we do need to look at the sun. The sun is, I think, extremely important in all of this. Here's another interesting type of research, and this is past temperatures directly from Greenland ice sheet. This is an example of a study that came out in 1998, where they first realized that the layers of ice in the great ice sheets actually will take a signal of the ambient temperature at the time that ice was formed. So here's what they'll say. Measured temperatures down through an ice sheet relate directly to past surface temperature changes. Here, we use the measurements from 2 deep boreholes on the Greenland ice sheet to reconstruct past temperatures. The GRIP, that is the Greenland Ice Sheet Project, ice core, was successfully recovered in 1992. And the 3,028.6 meter deep liquid-filled borehole with a diameter of 13 centimeters was left undisturbed. So 3,028, that is 9,931 feet, or 1.88, almost 1.9 miles deep. So they have this hole. They took out almost 2 miles of ice, 13 centimeters in diameter. Temperatures were then measured down through the borehole in 1993, 1994, and 1995. We used the measurements from 1995 because there was no remaining evidence of disturbances from the drilling, and the measurements were the most precise. The 2,037 meter deep ice core from Dive 3 was recovered in 1981. We used temperature data from 1983 measure. Histograms of the sampled geothermal heat flow density and of the temperature histories at each time before present can be made. Histograms from the grip reconstruction show that temperatures at the last glacial maximum were 23 plus or minus 2 degrees K colder than at present. That is a lot colder. That's, K would be, you know, same equivalent as Celsius. 23 plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius colder than present. So you could say 23, let's see, 23, 8. So that's going to be about, that's going to be almost 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperatures of this time, 25,000 years ago, reflect the cold temperatures seen on the measured temperature profile at a depth of 1,200 to 2,000 meters. The cold Younger Dryas and the warm Balling Alarod periods are not resolved in the inverse construction. Because the temperature signals of these periods have been obliterated by thermal diffusion because of their short duration. But anyways, after the termination of the glacial period, temperatures in our record increased steadily, reaching a period 2.5 degrees K warmer than present during what is referred to as the climatic optimum at 8 to 5,000 years ago. So after the termination of the glacial period, they go from 23 degrees plus or minus colder than now up to 2.5 degrees K warmer than present. During what
Just gotta YOLO everything. That's like the only way. It's too slow otherwise, honestly. It's just so slow.
Years ago. So that climatic optimum is what I've always kind of considered to be sort of maybe the source of these stories like the Garden of Eden and so on.
It's 22 pace.
We talked about that, I think, somewhat. It'd be fun to circle back to that because that was a very pleasant time to be alive, actually. Following the CO temperatures cool to a minimum of 0.5 degrees
23 what?
colder than the present at around 2,000 years. The record implies that the medieval period around 1000 AD was 1 degree warmer than present in Greenland. Two cold periods, one at 1550 AD and at 1850 AD, are observed during the Little Ice Age, with temperatures 0.5 to 0.7 degrees below the present. After the Little Ice Age, temperatures reach a maximum around 1930 AD, but then temperatures have decreased during the last decade. The climate history for the most recent times is in agreement with direct measurements in the Arctic region. The climate history for the last 500 years agrees with the general understanding of the climate in the Arctic region and can be used to verify the temperature amplitude. The results show that the temperatures in general have decreased since the climatic optimum, and that no warming in Greenland is observed in the most recent decade. Now, of course, that was in 1998. How much warming has there been since then? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show...
Yeah, because I keep hearing and reading a Greenland ice sheet is receding, it's melting.
Well, it's melted on the margins and thickened during the zone of accumulation.
Okay.
Now, this is 98, and what they're doing is they're looking at ice lake, right? They're going down that borehole, and they're able to take information from the ice and determine the temperature when that ice was formed. Okay, so what the ice is showing is that there has been no warming. That's what the ice itself is showing.
Yeah.
Okay, so see here. Okay, so here is your contour plots of all grip temperature histograms as a function of time. So you've got, if you look at this, you see there's a red curved line in the center of this. It's the reconstructed temperature history. The white curves are the standard deviations of the reconstructions. And the blue curve, the blue line, which you see, is the present temperature, okay? So A is the last, it says, as it says, that's the last 100 years. So 100 years before present, here's your past temperatures, degrees
No, I'm not
centigrade
doing this.
at Greenland. It's getting colder and colder, and then it's showing here this warming coming up to here, and then it declines again right here in the last few decades.
Not seeing your cursor, but.
Oh, here we go,
follow
right here.
you.
Sorry, right
Yeah.
there. Then B is the last 10,000 years. So here you can very clearly see coming up out of the Ice Age, you can see the climatic optimum right here, the CO, climatic optimum. And then it dips down, then it comes back up, then it dips down again, and this would be the Little Ice Age right in here. And then this, the blue line, as it says, represents the present temperature. Okay, and then you've got C, which is the last 2,000 years. Going back here, and you see, again, the last 2,000 years. Here would be the medieval warm period, right here. See this? This is 1000 AD, so this was your great cathedral building era right here. Then it declines down. And again, the red line, as it says, is the reconstructed temperature history. And see how it actually dips below the blue line right here? The blue line being the present temperature. So this now, of course, is Greenland. You can't necessarily say this represents the whole planet. But the issue is, you know, you can look at one region, and if you're only looking at one region, you can say, okay, well, this one region is not representative of the whole planet, so it cannot be considered evidence. On the other hand, how many regions or local deviations do you have to have before you can assume, well, yeah, it probably is global? If, for example, we see an expansion of glaciers in the Alps, if we see an expansion of glaciers in Scandinavia, in North America, in the Andes, and in New Zealand, as we have now documented to have occurred during the Little Ice Age, we're getting pretty close to being able to safely assume that we're looking at a global event. Were there areas where it was maybe not? Well, I don't know. I have, you know, maybe Africa, but I think the glaciers on Kilimanjaro expanded during the Little Ice Age. So again, you had to have a pretty broad aliquot of data that you're analyzing. But it seems to me at this point that it sure is pointing in the direction that these are global signals and not just regional. So this is from this appeared in the journal Geology in April of 2000. Lead author Sarah L. Brown with the Department of Geology, University of Vermont, Burlington, Vermont, and John Southon, Center for Accelerator Mass Spectrometry at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and a couple of others. The title of the article is A 10,000-Year Record of Extreme Hydrologic Events. Quantitative measures of extreme hydrologic events in the form of precipitation intensity and duration records exist for little more than 100 years of New England's history. Newspaper accounts and diaries extend this record back more than 300 years since European settlement began. Together, these records define the magnitude of extreme events and provide the design basis for local infrastructure. This paper demonstrates that ponds in mountainous New England, just as in similar landscapes around the world, have the potential to provide an even longer record that could reveal high magnitude hydrologic events as far back as deglaciation more than 13,000 carbon 14 years ago. Lake sediment preserve a record of surface processing, and by inference, the geomorphic effects of past climates and hydrologic events. In particular, terrestrially derived inorganic layers in otherwise organic-rich lake sediment provide a record of basin-scale runoff and sedimentation events. In one northern Vermont water body, Ritterbush Pond, we find 52 such layers, many of which are considerably thicker than sediment layers deposited during the past 300 years, for which we know at least relative storm intensity. This record of extreme hydrologic events suggests that New England is unprepared for the magnitude and thus destructive potential of future storms. The 52 discrete inorganic layers each represent an individual erosional event in the watershed that caused an episode of terrestrial sediment delivery to Ritterbush Pond. What caused the hydrologic and or geomorphic conditions that repeatedly allowed sediment transport to Ritterbush Pond? The most likely trigger for the deposition of coarser terrestrial sediment layers is runoff triggered by hydrologic events. Inorganic layer deposition in Ritterbush Pond is most likely the result of storms, including rain on snow events, which increase rates of hill slope erosion, stream channel scouring, and pond marginal sediment reworking. Specifically, we suggest that the terrestrial sediment stored in the watershed and at the pond margins is transported toward the center during storm events that significantly increase stream discharge and erosion. We can make rough estimates of storm magnitude represented by the layers deposited in Ritterbush Pond by using historic weather data, the modeled age of events, and the thickness of the inorganic deposits. Ritterbush Pond core C2 reveals only a single 1 centimeter thick layer within deposits of the last 300 years. The modeled age of the layer is consistent with the date of the largest storm in Vermont's written history, the flood of record 1927. Okay, so you had a 1 centimeter thick layer that dates right to Vermont's written record from written history, the flood of record 1927. If layer thickness is a proxy for storm magnitude, then 18 of the 52 events we identified in the Ritterbush Pond cores were larger than the 1927 flood. There was a layer that was 9 centimeters thick, 9.5, another one at 10 centimeter thick layers deposited at 2,600 years ago, 6,840 years ago, and 9,440 calibrated years before present. These three, I mean, you're talking basically 10 times the thickness of the largest recorded storm of the last 300. Okay, let that sink in. Those three are particularly striking and imply hydrologic events much larger than any witnessed during 300 years of Western settlement. So that's, now the question would be, how many other studies would confirm that? I mean, this is one study from Vermont, and it's showing that there were storms that were apparently on the order of 10 times more, of 10 times greater magnitude and intensity of the greatest storm of record of the last 300 years. So that must have been one hell of a storm. So the question, though, is if you could find comparable environments to take samples in other places, what would you find?
Yeah, would
Or
you
is this
find-
something, is this an outlier?
Right.
Or is this unique? Or is this going to be typical of what you can find? And without getting into it, what I've seen suggests that it's typical, that there are enormous amounts of evidence that would suggest extreme hydrologic, what they're calling hydrologic events, which are going to be directly related to storms, which encompass everything.
Do you think that this is just because there's so much literature on this stuff? This is known by the people who are kind of pushing the climate change agenda because they know eventually a massive storm is going to come, and they're preparing. It's like the narrative is like storms are going to get worse.
Yeah,
So it's
but
like it would play right into their
it's like
hands if one of these giant storms happens. Then they're like, see.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
they know that we're actually in a period where the storms are not very bad.
Yeah.
Historically, they've been much worse, so they can say the storms are going to get worse.
Yeah, they can easily say this, knowing that there's a pretty good probability that we will get some bad storms. Like it will be worse.
Well, there is, and that was in one of the previous, quotes that I read was the concern about, and even in this one, the concern that, are we prepared for that magnitude of storms? And here's the thing, the irony of the whole situation is to me that the solutions being proposed for dealing with climate change would actually make us more vulnerable.
Right. The evidence seems to be that the colder periods makes worse storms, especially with the hurricanes, the core samples from the holes. So if we reduce CO2 and if that actually makes it cooler, then we're going to have worse storms.
Or if there's something else besides CO2 altogether that's driving.
Yeah. But the narrative is like we need to reduce CO2 so it doesn't warm.
Right.
So if they're right, which they're probably not, then you reduce CO2 and it gets cooler, then the evidence states that that's when we'll have the worst.
Well, that seems to be consistent with
Yeah.
And we've looked at a pretty fair amount of evidence over the last half dozen or 10 episodes. So to kind of point in that direction, that there have been times, in recent geological history of the planet, the last couple millenniums, when, the intensity of these events have been greater than we've seen in the last 100 or 200. And this is a perfect example of that. Now, I would like to scour the literature and find if there have been parallel studies done in other ponds that exist, or lakes. Lake, I would imagine, would be the similar, that would show, these thick layers. But I mean, when you think about that, that's pretty significant, that the greatest storm of record of the last 300 years was a storm in 1927. And there is deposits of 3 of them that look like they were an order of magnitude more extreme. Be interesting to research that 1927 event, what accounts there were and what wind speeds there were, how much rainfall there was, to get an idea. I think I will do that. So.
Was it Ian that went up the coastline and? All the way up
Last summer. You mean?
I think, well, it was before that because we went up there. We have relatives up there, and we went up and we saw some of the destruction. Hit New York, and
Sandy?
Yeah, maybe Sandy.
Hurricane, Storm Sandy? Whatever.
Yeah.
Hurricane, tropical storm, whatever it's called. Sandy?
Yeah. Yep. It caused an enormous amount of erosion in some places in the mountain streams. Undercut entire houses that basically fell or were in the process of falling. Saw some of that. It did a lot of damage. So if that's nothing compared to the storms that they've had deep in the past, then I do think it's interesting that these people are saying, well, we're not prepared. The guy who's looking at the hurricane data saying the Caribbean islands are not prepared for the level of storms that we see in the data that's caught in the force drains in these holes. Yeah.
And storms that were occurring during times of cooler temperatures.
Right, cooler temperatures, yeah.
Well, frankly, if you look back over the recent history of the last 10, 20 years, nobody's ever prepared for hurricanes of any magnitude of this kind. I mean, it just seems like everybody's always surprised when a storm hits. It's like, holy shit, that was the biggest storm we've ever seen, you know?
Well, we certainly saw that down there south of Tampa when I went down there to do the interview with Tucker. I mean, we went right through the dead center of where, which hurricane was that made landfall? And the destruction was pretty extraordinary.
I've forgotten the name of that one, but the one that came from the Gulf and across going east. But yeah, my point is that we're going to have hurricanes. You know, they're going to be of varying magnitudes, and nobody really seems to be able to predict them. But it always just seems that everybody's always surprised when a hurricane hits. It always takes a different turn. It jogs left, jogs right, whatever.
Hard to predict it.
Right, and consequently, everybody's always surprised, and the media is always surprised. It's like, come on, you live in Florida, you live along the Gulf Coast. You've been building on the beaches for years, and what do you expect?
Well, yeah, that's the point, and that's why you can't use the dollar value of damage to infrastructure as a direct correlation of intensity or frequency of hurricane.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that really intrigued me, and this was, going back to pictures that I've seen of, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and great destructions, hurricanes and stuff. I saw this myself down there in near the Boca Grande, where the hurricane landfall was. You would see houses demolished, but then there's one house standing there in the middle. And I'm going, okay, what is that? Just a vagary of the wind, the atmosphere, or what's different about that house that the one on both sides of it got blown down and it's still standing? Or the roofs got blown off of houses. I saw a lot of that. But I know myself now, when we build like that, we build a roof, we do metal straps, hurricane straps, to tie the rafters to the wall top plate. And
then it picks up the whole house instead of just the roof.
Well, then what you do is you bolt the bottom plates, you bolt the frame into
to the foundation, yeah.
To the foundation, so it's got to lift the whole foundation. And then if you've got 2 foot wide by 1 foot thick footers, you're pretty good. I mean, it may blow windows out, but it's not gonna, I don't know, maybe 500 or 1,000 mile an hour is gonna demolish anything. But, a typical, even a full strength hurricane won't lift the whole house up, like on Wizard of Oz or something.
Right, just the whole house.
The whole house is up there twirling in the vortex with cows and things flying by. No, Russ, I don't think that would happen. Oh. But yeah, I mean, the point is that, actually you ask yourself, I mean, so there was a lot of solar collectors on roofs down that didn't fare too. That was another thing. Yeah. So the question is, if we stop using fossil fuel because we believe that fossil fuels are causing a climate catastrophe, that means there's a whole lot of implication as far as, our ability, our scientific and technological ability to respond to it. If we don't have, access to quantity of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, portable.
Yeah, mobile, portable energy sources.
Yeah.
And that, you were talking about the dollar value. I mean, the dollar value of a square foot of roofing that has solar panels on it is incredibly higher than just shingles.
Yeah.
So then you destroy one roof and it's a massive bill.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Yep, that's a good point.
Yeah, it was amazing to see that firsthand, and the amount of trees uprooted, thousands of trees just uprooted. And I'm thinking, what would that have been like? You know, I mean, if all around you trees are being large, 60, 70-foot tall trees are being uprooted.
Yeah.
That would be kind of a scary thing.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, they were already underway. You could see they were underway, cleaning stuff up. But you go down the main highway there, and there would be piles of debris just lining for miles on both sides of the highway. Because they're pulling it together, and then, even in the week or so that I was down there, and then went back again. Didn't they go back again? Yeah, they had already removed a lot of the stuff. So I mean, they were busy cleaning up. But it sure did tell me that, yeah, if I'm guessing, and I'm sure there's going to be engineering studies that come out, which I'm going to be very interested in reading about, what measures were effective in preventing houses from getting demolished and what measures were not taken that caused other houses to become demolished.
nuke 'em. Who's in favor of nuking hurricanes for science? I think we should try it.
So once it gets started, blow a nuke up in the middle of it and see what happens.
I just want to know.
Let's see what happens. So all of it spawns 100 smaller hurricanes,
Yes.
and each then grows into this monster.
Well,
Shedding
they're-
radioactive.
Yes, and they're radioactive.
Radioactive
That'd
hurricane.
be awesome.
Oh yeah, that
do
would
it
be
for
awesome.
science.
Wouldn't it, Doc?
We need to see what it's going to do.
But I thought that study from that Ritterbusch pond, I thought that was quite interesting.
That's
cool.
That's great.
No, it's a great episode.
It's a good
There's lot of
episode,
really
yeah.
good info.
Thanks everybody for joining us and watching. Remember, RandallCarlson.com for all your Randall Carlson needs. Sign up for the newsletter. Randall writes something for it it's once a month, right? Is it once a month?
I just went out.
Monthly.
Some of
Yeah.
the stuff that I talked about in there was quite interesting, I think. I talked about, I did talk about some climate change, studies in China and Tibet. We could get into that maybe next episode. And I also talked about new insights into the Hopewell phenomenon. And this is quite interesting. That the duration of the whole, very similar here, the idea, and I'll just make this very quick. In the older concept, the entirety of the Hopewellian enterprise that created all of that monumental earthwork structures and so forth was 700 years. Okay? Well, these new studies have reduced that to 250 years. So it's going to be interesting to ponder the implications of that, because now you're looking at less than, or about a third of the time, allowable time to create that incredible, amazing stuff there. And then what else? Yeah, I mean, I talked about it's very interesting stuff to do with climate change, and a couple of new studies. So, anyways, interesting stuff. And then one of the studies was extreme synoptic and climate events in ancient Mesopotamia, the development of cultures and civilizations in China, classical Maya, how all of these may have been affected by natural climate change. So, and this is the study I talked about specifically in this newsletter that just went out, was focusing primarily on Central Asia, because that's where a lot of research had not been done compared to other places. And again, it shows the same pattern. Anyhow, and they went into their conclusion is that one of the primary drivers, the two primary drivers, are changes in ocean circulation and changes in the sun. So we'll be picking up on, discussions about the sun.
All right. And we got a Montana trip coming up, so sign up for that. Contact@thecabin.com or randallcarlson.com. You can find it at the tours area.
All right. Finally,
All right, guys.
last thing I'll say
stuff.
is RandallCarlson.com is the only legitimate source.
Yep.
Sacred Geometry International is still fraudulently selling my stuff, trying to, as we get more and more attention and increase the numbers, he's trying to ride on our coattails and is using optimization techniques to, when people go to look for me, they're being directed to Sacred Geometry International, where he's then trying to monetize my work. So if people were so inclined, I would like the more people that know that that scam is going on, the better. So talk about it, inform people that it's fraudulent, and you couldn't even imagine how appreciative I if that finally came to an end.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. Great
Okay.
show. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night.
Welcome.
For another rendition of Randall Responds. We decided, yeah, we got enough time. We're kind of on a roll here, and we want to get to this Atlanta question. So, yep, same shirts, different show. We're going to do it again. Randall, how you doing, man?
I'm still doing well, Brad.
Right? Had a little
Actually,
break.
I'm doing better
Had
than
a
I
little
was
break.
a
Yeah.
few minutes ago, yes.
Excellent. Got a little drink of water, and yep.
I did.
Wet the whistle. All right, well, what we had mentioned at the end of the previous episode, talking about doing part 3 of the Atlantis live stream. So let's get to one of the Patreon contributors' questions that came in, looks like end of November last year. We're getting around to some of these. It takes some time, but we're going to be doing more of them. Randall's got a lot to respond to, and this is going to be one I'm curious about also. It says, Dear Mr. Carlson, and this is from Mike. Dear Mr. Carlson.
Salater, I don't know.
I'm not going to worry about last names.
Okay,
He'll know it's him.
okay.
Mr. Carlson, would you have in your possession any research that would pertain to the Irving Seamount, specifically to any subaquatic archaeology or geology performed in that area? When based on Plato's account, it checks many boxes for Atlantis. And you must admit, it does look like a volcanic caldera split in half. I will be performing a transatlantic crossing in summer 2023, and I plan to make the Irving Seamount part of my journey. I would like to dive one of the shallower southern ridges, which have accessible depths to scuba, as well as use a commercially available ROV and sonar systems. Although I am skeptical of any discovery, I approach the endeavor as fun, something to do while in the area. So, heck yeah, sailing across the Atlantic Ocean for the summer and doing some scuba diving, looking for Atlantis. Yeah, man. Something to do for fun. How about that? You know about the Irving seamount? It seems like maybe that's it's got another more or less common name.
Well, I think it's actually just next to the cruiser seamount. I think what I'll do is I'll do a share screen here so people can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, go for it.
We addressed this in the Atlantis live stream we did last year. Are we seeing this?
Sure do.
Great. Okay, I love this graphic here, but you'll notice the Azores Plateau, which is this feature, and it sits at the junction of three different plates: the North American plate, the North African plate, and the Eurasian plate right here. So you've got this triple junction, it's called. And I've named the Atlantis Seamount, the Plato Seamount, the Great Meteor Seamount here, and then the Cruiser Seamount. Now there's actually, if you look, there's two here. So the unnamed one is the Irving Seamount, which I believe of the two, I think what I'll do here, let's see if I've got a closer up, better view. Okay, so here you can see the triple seamounts right here. I'm going to back up. You can see what we're looking at is this in an orthographic view right here. Here's the Azores Plateau. Yeah, just a slightly different perspective on it. So I'm thinking that this one right here is the Irving, just the one just below Cruiser. But I've noticed in some of the maps and things I've looked at, they might actually be backwards. But I think that's it. So anyways, yeah, I don't know of any. I'm gonna stop this share and jump over to Google Earth here and take a look at the Google Earth view of it. So here's your cruiser seamount, or table mount they're calling it. So then that only leaves this for the Irving. Now I'm scanning over it with my cursor, looking at the depth.
He mentioned it looked like a caldera that had been split in half. So it seems like he's talking about both of them together. Looks like a caldera that's split in half. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, this looks like a caldera right here.
Like it broke off of the south side of the cruiser. That's kind of what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm wondering if he's looking at this and this. This certainly looks like a crater with its north wall blown out, which is, kind of similar to what we see out at Mount St. Helens with the wall blown out.
I'm looking at it if you like slid it up toward 2 o'clock.
Right.
It would make a round caldera.
Yeah, right up to here, connecting those two. Well, if there was enough tectonism to separate these, or if they were separated, yeah, it's tough to say.
Yeah, I'm just trying to envision what he's describing of it, split it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Well, look at Great Meteor, how flat it is. That's interesting. Now, how does it get that flat? Well, the main explanation is that it's truncated by a highly powerful erosive surf. We did talk about this some in the Atlantis series, and we're going to come back to that in part 3. Because, yes, I've got some new research on exactly this. So, Mike, I would say stay tuned, and we'll be doing this part 3, and I will particularly try to address. I have actually new information on Irving that I haven't really gone through yet, because I'm very much interested in understanding the relationship of these 3 seamounts and or table mounts, if you want to call them, and the plateau itself, which is this. And when you look at this, you can see that the islands of the Azores are actually the tops of mountains whose bases are on the plateau, which is now, like, let's see, right there we're looking at 5,000 minus 5,700. So this is slightly more than a mile below the surface of the ocean.
Okay, right. Yeah, you said you were checking the the depths there down. I was wondering how far is he really going to be able to dive?
Well, let's see. I wish we had better. I wonder if Google Earth Pro has better resolution at this depth. So
Yeah, it's saying minus a mile there, minus 5,400 feet.
minus a mile, yeah. Well, there's minus 3,000, minus 4,000. Let's see what we got over here.
And that's on the upper side
Yeah.
of the ridge. Yeah.
Yeah, none of this is above water. Over here, we're minus 1,500. So I guess you're going to have to go for this one, Mike. Can you hold your breath if you're going to be snorkeling? Can you dive that deep, 1,500 feet? Yeah, I think you're going to need a remote operated vehicle for that. Yeah, can you imagine? Oh God, this is what we need to do. We need, okay, people complaining about money, shut up and quit complaining and send us some money and we will get with, well, we were going to get with the Russians, because they have submersible deals that you can rent a submersible with a pilot. I know that might be on hold for right now. Anyways, it's what we need. We need to get down there and cruise around here in submersibles. Submarines.
Yo, what's up, something of Jacket?
Yeah.
Shoot the evildoers, yeah, really.
But who knows?
Needs to be done.
Needs to be
They're
done.
just doing their
Nobody's really
job.
looking for anything with regards to.
They're just doing
You know,
their
here's the
job.
thing. If you're not looking for something specific,
What's up, man?
you may go right by it and you may see it, but you may not really see it. You know what I mean? If you're not looking for something specific, you might see something.
call me
and
bastards.
It passes right by what it is you're looking at.
Shoot the commie
Well,
bastards.
the Navy's been down there. We just got to find some more friends on the inside.
There we go. All right. I like that. Okay, so.
People
Well, we got our SEAL buddies.
What's up, dude? Welcome.
Of course, they're retired, but they got connections. Let's talk to those boys. So, okay, so that's Mike Salater. And Mike, listen, man, if you do, summer's coming up. If you do go, man, stay in touch. Let us know what you find. And maybe if you find something interesting, you can drop in and spend a little time with us on the podcast.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear about your results out there, transatlantic crossing this summer. Do you
And I'm
want
with-
to, well,
No,
just
go
if you
ahead.
want to preview any more of what you'd be able to cover in the upcoming part 3 of the Atlantis live stream?
Oh, well, some more of the geomorphology for sure, because I've got some new studies on ocean, perhaps accelerated tectonism.
Hey, fuck off, man.
Also some of the archaeological and anthropological implications. There's some interesting new stuff on there. New information about the seafaring capabilities of humans tens of thousands of years ago. Yeah, collection of things.
People are always asking about the guanches and some of the newer genetic studies, so we've been able to get a little more insight into that and
Yep.
ready to present. So yeah, that's really fascinating stuff too.
Yes, it is.
All right, excellent. So let's get on another one here. We got a fairly quick one from Sudath. Hi, Mr. Carlson. 2 questions. We're gonna do both of these, right, Randall?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. What has the moon to do with the Pleiades?
Okay, well, that's a bit of a stumper there. Yeah, Sudath, I think you would say your name's Sudath. Yeah, awesome question, and I think all I can say at this point is stay tuned, because we're going to be circling back. I've already promised that 2023 we're going to disclose some moon information, and the connections between the moon and the Pleiades are interesting but tenuous at this point, and I have a strong feeling that somewhere down the road, the 2 roads, the moon and the Pleiades, are going to converge at a major intersection. But we're going to save that for now. Sorry, man. And I believe you did have a second question, though.
Yeah,
that I might be able
good
to.
question and to the point there. Everybody always wants some in-depth information about the moon, but yep, will be forthcoming. All right, part 2 of his question from Sudath. Can you give me a clue on the moon connection? All right. And here we go, part 2. Do you know, as an architect, the story about Vitruvi's Primeval Hut.
Vitruve, that would be short for Vitruvian.
Like Vitruvian, yes. This is the story about Atum building the first house in Egypt.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm not a real expert on that, but I do know that it's interesting. I think it influenced people like Frank Lloyd Wright, because essentially what it is, see if I can find a little to show you here. Yes, the primitive hut idea supports a back-to-nature philosophy. A romantic idea which gained popularity in the mid-18th century and influenced literature, art, music, and architecture. Now, we've talked somewhat about the Hudson River School of Art. I think we could safely say that that whole idea of the back-to-nature philosophy found its way into inspiring those Hudson River School artists. But others like Churchward or Church was an architect as well as an artist. But you know what those guys were doing was they were seeing a pristine wilderness and knew that it was about to become transformed. They could look into the future. They saw what was happening. They saw that humans were moving in. They were starting to change the landscape. So a lot of these pristine landscapes that they were seeing, they're looking at them and they're going, okay, we're in this privileged position now of seeing something as it's been for millennia, and now it's about to undergo a transformation. And so they set about to try to capture that spiritual feeling, literally spiritual feeling that they had with that connection with pristine nature in their artwork. And this whole idea of back to nature, the Vitruvian hut refers to this idea that there was a back to nature sentiment about a lot of the Greek classical or Greek revival. Because again, you know, when you look at the Greek temple, you know, they're mimicking columns, they're mimicking, you know, you look at the Corinthian and with the exploding vegetation at the top, you know, to imply this the connection in between the stone as a living thing and the living plants. All of that kind of harkened back to this idea. There was a pretty famous painting, or maybe it was a woodcut. Let's see if I've got it handy here. Let's see. Yeah, so there was Lagier who wrote on the idea of the primitive hut. And that the idea is that humans, no matter how sophisticated they are with, you know, civilization, and really when we look at civilization, we can almost think of it as a series of degrees of being able to remove ourselves from being totally subjugated to the forces of nature, right? And so in one of the comments here about Lagier's work, it says that he theorizes that ultimately, man wants nothing more really than shade from the sun and shelter from the storms. The same requirements as a more primitive humans. Lagier writes, pieces of wood raised perpendicularly give us the idea of columns. The horizontal pieces that are laid upon them afford us the idea of entablatures. And this is, you know, columns with entablatures, you know, we've kind of had that in our consciousness with our recent trips to Nashville, and the full-scale replica of the Parthenon is there, because essentially what we're seeing is that basic idea of columns, pieces of wood raised perpendicular, and then beams laid across it. Branches form an incline that can be covered with leaves and moss so that neither the sun nor the rain can penetrate therein, and now the man is lodged. Lagier concludes, quote, the little rustic cabin that I have just described is the model upon which all the magnificences of architecture have been imagined. And this isn't, you know, going to be, this is just the stuff I'm able to dredge up off the top of my head. I'm not attempting here to go into any detailed explanation about the whole idea, but it would be very very interesting to dive into it. Yeah, here we go, defining the essential elements of architecture as a statement of purpose. A philosophy that drives the work of an artist and practitioner. Simplicity of design and the use of natural materials. What Lagier believes are architectural essentials are familiar ideas that have been embraced by the more modern architects, including Frank Lloyd Wright and the vision of Gustav Stickley at Craftsman Farms, both of whose work I found very inspirational. And Lagier's rustic cabin is sometimes called the Vitruvian hut because Lagier built on ideas of natural and divine proportion, documented by the ancient Roman architect Marcus Vitruvius, who wrote about geometry and architecture. And I'm going to share this image of the primeval hut, and let's see here. There we go. Are we seeing this?
Okay, sure did. Well, we got the text now. I'm going to saw that image there for a moment.
Oh, okay. Well, so people can see where I'm getting this from. Here's thoughtco.com. Let me get that out of the way and reopen.
There it is.
Okay, the primitive hut. Yes, there it is. So we have a female form here that represents nature, essentially pointing out this is like the Vitruvian hut, right? And this generally is taken like this is, you know, the student of architecture here, like Porky Pig, is wearing no pants. But this infant represents the naive infant architect, if you will, and getting instructed by nature. Let's see what they say here in the picture. An idyllic woman, perhaps the personification of architecture, points out a simple rustic cabin to a child, perhaps the unknowing naive architect. The structure she points to is simplistic in design, uses basic geometric shapes, and is constructed from natural elements. Lagier's primitive hut is his representation of the philosophy that all architecture derives from this simple ideal. So this is the frontispiece created by the British engraver Samuel Whale. Oh no, which is slightly different from the illustration used in the well-known celebrated French edition. So that is that, and it's very interesting stuff. And
let's hold on to that for a second, because I'm recalling, you know, observing there in the lower right corner, right? Is that like part of a column that's down? You know, there was prior great constructions that have been destroyed.
Absolutely, Brad. I wasn't going to mention that, but there it is right there, a fluted column. Here's the capstone. This is an ionic volute, so yeah, you got it, Brad. That was an astute observation.
Like what?
Mm-hmm, that's right. So
yeah, more places to go with that one for sure.
Oh man, yeah. So it's almost like, yeah, here's the ruin and rubble of the previous. It's been destroyed in the cataclysm, and here's nature pointing out, that's how it starts. This is what it'll rebuild civilization. Here's where it starts. The Vitruvian hut.
Okay, good question there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, just tip of the iceberg, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I'd like to do a whole thing sometime just on the Hudson River School, because ever since I was a kid, I've been so inspired and thrilled by those great paintings, and we have, I think, shared some of them.
You have, right? You got excellent response about those too.
Oh, did we? Yeah, it'd be good to introduce people to who are the key artists in that movement, what their philosophy was. Yeah, rich stuff.
I'll remind you of that one.
Okay.
All right, let's get another one, because I know a lot of people out there are probably having the same question. This is from Jesse. Hello, Randall and Randall's team. I am wildly curious about the progress of the search for land for the Grand Vision venture that was the subject of the conference in Sedona. That was this time last year, Easter weekend and birthday weekend. Even a no update would be appreciated. Note, I am visiting Nashville to scope out as a potential place to move, and wow, it'd be a kicker if the Tennessee land were working out.
And who's this from?
What's the latest? Yep, this is Jesse.
Jesse Leon. Yeah, okay, Jesse. Well, good timely question. We have not lost interest in that. We got sidelined for a few months with something that could possibly turn out to be huge. We're keeping our fingers crossed. We helped jumpstart a process here, and we did our part, and so we're back to our previous plan.
I don't ever want to do that strat again.
Yes, I've been actually interested.
I don't have to ever do it again.
Because I've really begun to take another dive back into the market. We're still looking at Eastern Tennessee. I've made a couple of new good friends, Warren Stoury and Ryan Turbeville up there in Nashville. Really getting to know folks up there. We've been up there several times now. I'm seriously, looking at that as a major base of operations going forward for the rest of the decade, really, because I like what's happening in Nashville. They've got a great attitude about business and entrepreneurship, creativity, working with producers and creative people. I really like that. I've looked at some of the statements by the Chamber of Commerce. I like the fact that Tennessee has no income tax, which helps simplify things very much. But yeah, I'm just in fact looking at, I was going to mention that Ryan is in real estate, and so we've actually just within the last couple of weeks circled back, and now we're picking that up again. And hopefully, if the thing we've been working on pans out, it'll give us, put us a long way towards having the resources we need to move forward. But we are going to, in the next month or two, into the spring and summer, we're going to be talking a great deal about that, presenting much more specifics and numbers and so forth about that whole venture. It's definitely not fallen by the wayside. It just got temporarily. We had to deal with some other stuff. We've done that, and so now we're circling back. And
right. More to come on that story.
Absolutely.
Are you going to cover any more about that in the upcoming Sedona event this Earth Day weekend?
Yes, I am.
All right, so more updates on that, and I'm certainly curious too. Been to that area quite a few times now and loving it, and the people we're meeting are just fantastic. So see where that goes. All right, we're going to skip a couple that are related to the magnetic field of the planet, impacts, and the antipody effect from impacts. I think we can probably make a full random response out of those two. So the last one here we've got from the Patreon subscribers and supporters is from Patrick, and this is something has been requested on the YouTube comments also. I would really like Randall's catastrophe list from episode 90.
And that is the list of extreme weather events.
Extreme weather events, that's right.
Right.
And we can certainly make those available. There's a blog on randallcarlson.com, and we'll make sure those get up as soon as possible, and maybe even before this comes out. So check randallcarlson.com. And of course, get the newsletter there that comes out first Saturday of every month, and you'll get information when new things like this are posted, what tours and events are coming up, and Randall does some excellent summaries of some of the recent scientific work that's being done, and that's pertinent, and definitely worth a read on your Saturday morning when you're having a coffee, or maybe there's still cartoons on Saturday morning.
Do they still show Heckle and Jekyll cartoons?
I don't think they have Heckle and Jekyll anymore, man.
They're gone? Okay, well.
Yep.
I think that Heckle and
Internet
Jekyll...
only.
Well, all of the cartoons we watched when we were kids would now be way too politically incorrect.
That's right.
And there's no way. I mean, boy, can you imagine if they were showing some of those cartoons we used to watch? We'd have millions of young, triggered
I thought we were gonna run further forward. That's why I didn't aim at the right place, because he didn't go down the step.
Yeah, having seizures, passing out, fainting.
That's what so much comedy is based upon, or used to be at least. Pushing those buttons and making people uncomfortable and
So,
finding the humor in it.
yeah. So maybe some furniture maker can bring back the fainting couch for the new generation of Wokesters when they're
No clue what that
overly triggered. You've never heard of the fainting couch?
fainting couch.
Look it up. Okay, if you have not heard of that was a real thing, by the way. Kind of fell out of favor though, I think. Okay, sorry.
All right, not a problem. Good stuff. Anything else we need to say that's coming up?
Yeah, so
Always something.
the extreme weather events. Okay, so we've got Laura now who is taking the burden of a lot of that stuff for us. So hopefully, as a result of that and her efforts, we'll see a lot more timely things being posted. She's going to be expanding the website. We've been giving her material, so hopefully we will see in the next few weeks to month or two a lot of new stuff going up on the website. And we will have a folder or a file. We'll have a place you can go online. We're going to have the whole. What I've done is I've gone back to the 1600s, and it's not all inclusive or comprehensive, but it certainly gives an idea of the. And for those of us who are, having to try to bring some insight to our friends and acquaintances and family and coworkers and so on that are busy guzzling the Kool-Aid and believing everything that they're reading in mainstream media about the climate crisis. And this is one reason I did this was just so that we could have an enormous amount of ammunition to show that, there's nothing going on that's unprecedented now. It's not well documented. And like I said, I went back, I think, to the late 1600s, came down to right around the 1970 or so through the 1960s, at the point at which even the proponents of catastrophic global warming were saying that prior to that there was not enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to be able to measure any kind of atmospheric response at all. So that's kind of where I cut it off, and then I think maybe I have a few examples in the 70s. But what you'll see there is, we get into that. And there's also, a lot that we've covered in the last, 4, 5, or 6 episodes of the Cosmographia, looking at this whole question from various angles and looking at how statistics are being used and misused to create false impressions and so on. So if you haven't seen those yet, go back to, what would you suggest, Brad, 90?
Yeah, that list is on 90. That's exactly where I was going to go. People are new to Randall Carlson. People coming in to hear about Atlantis and learning something new. Yeah, the Cosmographia podcast, the Randall Carlson podcast. He's going deep dive into the data.
Oh, you're such a motherfucker. You're such. Like what? Like what?
Changes and is what
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Unprecedented. And that basically started on episode 87, and 95 just came out.
That was really fast, too.
Unprecedented climate crisis, question mark. So we've recorded up to 97, so yeah, there's a whole series on this climate change controversies. So lots to dig in there in this list of extreme weather events.
That's like 95% of my VODs is me passing away in the game and me saying, "Oh, that was fast.
That
was fast paced. That was fast.
2 hours each.
It was fast run."
The episodes now we bumped it up a little bit, let you go a little bit longer, and trying to be more focused on the material and get it out there because it's definitely a lot of things that are not at all coming through the MSM.
And then the PB, they go, "Oh, that was not fast."
There's other people out there doing similar reporting about this, and find them too. Find Randall and educate yourself on these because what's coming through is obfuscation. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a mess of what people are being brainwashed with, and even multi-billions of dollars into school programs to convince the young people of certain mindsets that aren't playing out in the data if you really dig into the data like Randall has and he's presenting to us on these podcasts. So hope you catch up on those, and we'll do another one of these Randall Responds episodes soon.
Yes, we will.
Any more questions to tackle, Randall?
Well, I like questions. I like when I can answer questions. Sometimes I even like when I can't answer questions because it gives me new things to think about and research. And yeah, some of the questions I've seen come in, yeah, there's definitely some more good ones we need to address. So let's do it sooner rather than later. I'm going to be going out to Verde Valley, Sedona, south of Sedona, in a couple of weeks to do the Earth Origins Conference.
What?
Interesting lineup of people. And we're going to be discussing well, there's going to be a lot of topics, I'm sure, but kind of the focus of my topic is going to be the Grail, because the Grail seems to be pretty relevant to the season of spring and the idea of resurrection. So we'll kind of be looking at it in that context. It ought to be good stuff.
Sounds good, and those are available to purchase as a live stream, but of course they will be available as video on demand afterwards.
Yeah.
So that's Earth Origins 5 in Verde Valley, Arizona, featuring Randall and about a dozen other speakers there. It should be interesting and diverse program.
Yep.
All right, well, let's wrap this one up, and we'll see you next time. More Randall Response coming soon.
Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Well, good.
Gotta go more right there. We're having really good attempts though, like we're doing everything right, I guess. I could R aim earlier. Could even reduce lag. It would also stabilize me. It would be faster too. It would be a lot faster. I should probably go there to the spot and R aim. I think I'll just start doing that. I'll try that. Because then that'll solidify me too. Then I can just kind of like put a pin down with just push R right where I want to be. I think it's a good idea. That's a great idea. I know Ryan Gibbs does that.
This is Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Cosmographia podcast with Randall Carlson. We are once again, and as always, joined by Bradley. What's up, Brad?
Hey man, doing good?
Today? Doing good. Mike, how you doing out
Howdy,
there?
guys.
Good. And Randall, of course, star of the show. What's up, my man? Oops.
Be careful now.
Oh no. Randall, how is it going, sir?
Well, I have no complaints. Here we are on March 21st.
Look at that.
The world is in a weird place.
It's not a bad idea.
It is.
It's actually a great idea.
Oh, the equinox is come and gone.
It's yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday, I think.
Officially spring in the northern hemisphere.
19th actually was early this year, regularly early.
Extra early, yes. So, we are hoping that everything sort of normalizes within the next few weeks so we can get back out in the field and not have any extra roadblocks there on that front, because we don't really need that in our long-term game plan, which requires being able to move out, collecting data,
Right.
inspecting, investigating sites. But I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will run its course.
I think so.
Come on.
And
That back boost is just so terrible.
the environment, the post
God, that back boost, man.
crisis
It was a
environment
weird setup because somehow someone saw me or shot me, like,
rather than going
because I made the
some
fourth
prolonged
bullet.
depression.
It was just dumb.
But I know that
Whatever.
my good friend Ian, we talked
Oh my god, that was the first time in a long time.
about 2 weeks from being
Like half an hour.
ready to open, basically. And we don't know where we're going to be at in 2 weeks. Are we going to be able to open? But his other restaurant yesterday morning had to lay off 30 employees. So you got to wonder if some of the response isn't worse. A lot of questions raised about this whole thing, the way it's
Yep.
played out.
Same thing is happening with our business. Kyle and I are we work in the agriculture side of like an orchard for olives and grapes, and we have a tasting room in town that sells wine and olive oil and food and stuff, and they've had to shut the tasting room down. Now Kyle and I are still able to go to work out on the farm part, but the tasting room, obviously, which is more like a restaurant or a bar, had to close down for safety. Since everyone else is doing it, you can't be the only one open for seemingly quote unquote ignoring the problem. So it is an interesting thing happening right now.
But we're here to talk about interesting things that happened 12,800 and some years ago.
Right. Let's put it in perspective.
I don't think I shot his foot either. I think I shot his thigh,
We would have been worse off during that.
which is not as long an animation, I think.
In fact, in some cases, the mortality rate may have been as much as 100%. Yeah. Referred to a study that came out in 2011, Jesse and Ballinger, and this focus was on the American Southwestern deserts and what happened at the end of the Younger Dryas as far as human population. And this was published in Fraternity International, like I said, in 2011. He asked this question: whether or not abrupt Younger Dryas climate change affected regional paleo environments and late Pleistocene hunter-gatherer populations is an important topic in the archaeology of the American Southwest. This paper reviews multiple age-resolved proxies.
It's gotta be like against the glass.
And direction of the Younger Dryas chronozone, which is just a fancy term for the Younger Dryas, as a marker, particularly within the stratigraphic context. The magnitude and direction of the Younger Dryas chronozone environmental changes in different settings and systems. There are impressive records of vegetation, faunal, stable isotope, and geomorphological change coincident with the YDC, which is the Younger Dryas chronozone. These correlate with important adaptive changes in human hunting and land use, as revealed in the analysis of spatio-temporal distribution of late Pleistocene hunting technologies. Significant cultural changes that coincide with the YDC include the Clovis to Folsom transition, the demise of mammoth hunting, and the development of an emphasis on bison, increased regionalization, and this is the key part right here, the abandonment of the Northwest Chihuahuan and Sonoran deserts by mobile big game hunters. So for centuries, there had been evidence of this being the Chihuahua Desert and the Sonoran Desert being actually much more humid with a lot more vegetation and the existence of a very prevalent mobile hunting culture in that region. Younger Dryas begins, and what happens? The abandonment. So when they use the word abandonment, you would think, well, these people moved elsewhere, and that may have possibly been it. But the point is that they were there and then they were not there. Nobody is really necessarily knowing, though, if they moved, where did they move? Okay? Now, in that region, this was the San Pedro Valley of southeastern Arizona. I think I showed this last time, but it's quite impressive and worth looking at again. This is the black mat.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So there was cultural activity below, but not above. So this is an illustration from Ballinger. So then he goes on to say, the post-Clovis. This is in the actually in the. Is this the abstract? No, I don't think it's the abstract. This is the actually shows up, but this is in his report. The post-Clovis archaeological record of the Southwest has been explained by the early development of a desert archaic adaptation. The most significant post-YDC change in material culture is the appearance of brownstone and pinto type and notch projectile points that occur between 9 and 8,514 years ago. So this is post Younger Dryas, and what he's talking about, the pinto type there is just the type of point that showed up several thousand years after the abandonment of these regions by the Clovis culture. He points out, he says, in the southeastern Arizona, a noticeable 1,400-year hiatus occurs in the archaeological record following Clovis and Pleistocene extinctions. Western stem projectile points are also rare in southern Arizona. In any case, there's presently no compelling evidence for hunters or gatherers in the northwestern Chihuahuan Desert or the Sonoran Desert interior during the YDC. So in other words, this particular area, which covers a vast area of the southwest, and will include both those two deserts, did have cultural activity going on which ceased right at the Younger Dryas boundary. And he actually refers to the extinction of the Clovis culture, which I think is a legitimate way to describe it.
So these people occupied these areas that are now desert. Does that imply that they weren't
Yes.
areas?
Yes, it does. It does. And I mean, they were a mobile hunting culture, so there was
I mean,
a lot
that's-
of big game.
Right. And that's recent, geologically speaking, for a place to be not arid, and now it is. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we find that to be the case all over the world.
Okay.
The desertification has occurred in many places quite rapidly. So they conclude attention is drawn to chronological correlations that exist between the Younger Dryas chronosome as measured in the Greenland ice cores, regional paleo-environmental changes, and major human adaptive changes during the Balling-Allerod Younger Dryas transition, including the appearance and then the disappearance of Clovis technologies at approximately 12.8 thousand years before present. Second, a switch in large animal prey from mammoth and bison to primarily bison. So bison were one of the mega mammals that somehow managed to survive the mass extinction event. Remember, we've talked about it. I mean, there were, dozens of species that went extinct, but dozens of species survived. In North America, it was roughly, I think we're going to say about 70% of extant species at the terminal Pleistocene went extinct during that transition from Pleistocene to Holocene. And among the ones that survived were bison.
Such a scam.
Musk oxen was another one of the mega mammals. Moose. In the case of bison, though, the species did diminish in size from, the super bison, which may have been a precursor species. I'm not quite sure if the super bison and the post, the Holocene bison, which was considerably smaller, where it was actually descended. I presume it was. I don't know the exact genetic sequencing there. That's an interesting study that I would like to do, but there is so much. So Folsom regionalization, population growth from about just after 12,700 years to 11,700 years ago. So it would appear there was about a 200-year hiatus before the first Folsom artifacts started showing up. So the apparent abandonment of the northwestern Chihuahuan deserts and Sonoran deserts by hunter-gatherer populations after 12.8 thousand years before present, and the reappearance of people in the stratigraphic record of those deserts around 10,000 carbon-14 years, which was about 11,000 or 11.5 thousand years BP. So there's that interesting date again, which is now, the end of the Younger Dryas between 11.5 and 11.6. So real measurable cultural activity shows up in these areas, as it says here, they're giving a date at 11,500 years ago. So for the most part, these areas were, any cultural activity was absent. So then that raises the question, what became of the people that were there? And it really, did they move somewhere else? Or were they essentially eliminated?
Yeah, once again, that it almost points to them moving somewhere else, because we have all of these, fossils of the various animals that were there, but there are no Clovis bones again. So it seems that if they had been destroyed with all of these animals, we should find their bones all over the place in these same layers.
One would think. Although, maybe the circumstances between, if you have a mass mortality event, is it going to impact humans the same way as Mega Man?
Still too slow.
I don't know. If carcasses...
I don't know if I got a back boost there too, but I was just too slow. Everything was just too slow still. God damn it, I'm just not clean.
Like the humans would have escaped any kind of flooding.
Oh, see, I didn't shoot his foot either. I shot his leg.
Yeah, and then succumbed later.
I think I got an RE way earlier.
Food or fresh water or whatever.
Yes.
I didn't get the right animation either.
During some of the big plague events,
due to my fault.
In history,
I'm learning. I am learning.
The mortality was so widespread that people weren't getting buried. Their carcasses were just being left right there on the ground to decay naturally. Generally presumed succumb to scavengers of various types. Macro scale scavengers, as well as microbial scale scavengers. So then, into the work of David Anderson and Albert Goodyear. They wrote a paper which came out in Quaternary International again, 2011. Multiple lines of evidence for possible human population decline / settlement reorganization during the early Younger Dryas. So the Paleo-Indian database of the Americas, which is abbreviated PIDBA, integrates database and geographic information system technology to provide location data for almost 30,000 Paleo-Indian projectile points, measurements